I apologize to those of you who are new, but in fact this is the 17th lecture of this course, but you don't need to worry about it. There's always connections with the previous lessons, but in a way each of the lessons is complete in itself. And what we've been talking about over the last few weeks is a Buddhist teaching called the Mangala Sutta. Mangala means blessings, so it's a discussion of things which are considered blessings in Buddhism. And this teaching is interesting because it offers us a sort of stairway, starting with very simple things which you can practice to improve your life. Things like maybe being selective about who your friends are. Things like making sure you live in an environment which is positive. And moving on to more complex issues like how you can become self-sufficient in life, how you can get along with the rest of your family. And all of this forms a foundation for spiritual practice. Because in Buddhism, we feel that although we might like to help other people, but if we haven't helped ourselves first, then we would just be adding to our suffering. So we must have something ourselves first before we have something to give to other people. And today, the subject matter is basically about what we mean by purity in Buddhism. Because when we think of purity, we might think of a person as being someone who is maybe sacrifices themselves for other people's good. But in Buddhism it has a deeper meaning, because it means that we as a person have to be pure in our nature, in our character, not just in the things which we express to the world, but to really be pure down to the level of our mind. So when we are meditating, for example, and we find our mind is hard to control, then in Buddhism we blame those problems on impurities which we have on the level of our mind. So it's not something someone else can see, it's something which is secretly known only to ourselves. Maybe we only just learned about it if we started to meditate today, that we have this problem with our mind. But in Buddhism we take these things quite seriously, because small things on the level of the mind, if we allow those things to overcome our mind, can lead to serious things which we might say or which we might do to other people in the world. So something which may be just irritation when it's in your mind may cause you to shout at people if it comes out into things which you say, or it may cause you to beat someone up if it's expressed into action. So we consider the mind something which may be even more important than our physical body. And normally the mind is something which we can transform by our own efforts. If we're not satisfied with the state of our mind, then we can change it. We don't believe in destiny, but we believe in taking control of our own destiny. So if we talk about purity or becoming pure in Buddhism, we don't wait for someone else to do that for us, or we don't put our trust in someone else to make us a purer person, but we must take the initiative to make ourselves into a purer person. And this is quite different from attitudes in other religions, where often just by doing a ceremony you can make a break with your past, or just by going to see a priest you can get rid of all the bad things in your past. In Buddhism we don't think it's as simple as that. One thing which you may have heard of is called the law of karma. You heard of that? And it means that if you do something good, then good things will come back to you. If you do something bad, then bad things will come back to you. And it will come back whether you like it or not. So even though you may have done something a long time ago and think maybe, oh, the law of karma forgot to give its retribution back to me, but someday it's going to come back. So if we are wanting to become pure, then we cannot just forget about our past. We can improve how pure we are now, but we also have to overcome the problems which are not pure from our past. Different religions, as I said, have got different approaches to getting rid of impurities. If you are Catholic, then you can go to confession. Supposing you go and punch someone on the nose, and then you can go to confession and you say, Father, I'm very sorry, I have sinned, I punched this guy on the nose, and they say, never mind, my child, do such and such, and you are absolved of these sins. But if you meet the person you punched on the nose later, do you think they will also feel that your sins have been absolved? Not unless they've been talking to the priest anyway. Because the karma didn't go away, you see, especially in their memory. In other religions, such as Hinduism, they have a ceremony known as bathing, especially bathing in the river Ganges on a full moon day. And if you bathe, then apparently all your sins will float away with the river water. And this is possibly why the Ganges is not particularly clean, because it's filled with everyone's sins, which have been washed away. But again, according to the law of karma, if it's something on the level of your mind, you can scrub yourself with a scrubbing brush and it still doesn't come out. Supposing you say something bad to somebody, you can rinse your mouth out with soap, but it doesn't change what you've already done. And this is why in Buddhism, it's the truth is hard sometimes to accept, but we say you cannot just give up your past. So what should we do? Just wait for our bad karma to run out? Should we make a wish that, come on bad karma, I'm here waiting for it, come and exhaust yourself so that I can get on with my life? Well, we do have a practical way around it, and the best way of describing it is dilution. For example, if you take a spoonful of salt and you put it in a glass of water, where the salt can be compared to bad things which you have done in your past, and the clean water might be compared with the good things which you've done in the present time, would the water still taste salty? Yeah? That's because the relative amount of salt and water is still more or less equal. You cannot make the salt go away. But what you can do is make the amount of water greater. If you put the same spoonful of salt into a bucket of water, will it still taste salty? Yes, but less than before. Why? Because the relative amount of good deeds is larger than the few bad things which you have done. So it's still there, but the relative amount is less. Maybe the effect on your life, on average, will be less than before. But what if you make it into a huge storage tank? Still one spoonful of water, but the amount of water in there has been increased by 100 times or 1,000 times, the salt didn't disappear. It's still there. But if you taste the water, will you be able to detect the salt anymore? Unlikely. But it's still there. And this is similar to the theory of what we do if we want to become purer as according to Buddhist principles, where we'd be increasing the amount of good things in our life, so that the majority of things which come back to us will be the outcomes of those good things.
Oh, there's some stories in Buddhism where people have been quite bad throughout their lives, and then at the last minute things get good. Their karma doesn't seem to catch up with them. They're born in a heavenly realm, or?
If you remember back to the course on Buddhist concepts, there are 4 types of karma.
Yeah.
So karma can give its fruits in this lifetime, next lifetime, subsequent lifetimes, or it can be defunct. And defunct normally means that the karma never gets the chance to give its results, because something happens to you in the meantime, like you don't get reborn anymore, which means that there's nothing left for the karma to give its results on. But you shouldn't pin your hopes on that.
So how does that work then? Just because maybe you do a good last deed, that it can become defunct?
Well, it has to be a pretty serious good deed to not get reborn again. I give you the example of the Venerable Moggallana. Have you heard of him? The Buddha's left-hand disciple, who was very good in various sorts of miraculous powers. Moggallana. Well, he was a monk who, because of his prowess in meditation, had become endowed with ability to walk in the air and, visit other cosmoses and parallel universes, that sort of thing, as a result of his meditation ability. So he was quite potent as a meditator. But in his past, he had, at the behest of his wife, carted his parents off into the forest and feigned to beat them to death, so that his parents would think that they had been beaten to death by robbers, not by their own son. And the last moment before he came to the end of his life, that karma came back to him, and he was beaten into small pieces by, again, robbers in the forest, even though he had such a lot of mental powers, when he could have presumably have evaded those robbers by disappearing or flying through the air or whatever. He couldn't avoid his karma. So don't pin too many hopes on it. The best policy is to dilute. If you look at this particular blessing in perspective, you might wonder why this idea of practicing for purity has come at this stage. Because basically it's between all the skills of making your family harmonious and things like helping your extended family or doing things of public benefit, what we call welfare work. The next 2 blessings, which we'll study after this, are basically to do with welfare work